Okay, today I'm talking to Paul Chandler-Burns, who is based in Newmarket. Thanks for agreeing to talk to me today, Paul. If I got this correct, you're an ex-betting industry employee, semi-professional punter who filters a well-known tipster's bets to profit. You bet on reality TV and football. Have I missed anything?
I just mentioned I do the golf majors as well in the Ryder Cup. I think there's some nice edges there with the bookies' favours. But other than that, yes, most of the umbrella covered there as far as the betting world goes.
And you're a successful punter. How long have you been making it pay?
I came off the cruise ships that I work on now. I left them in 2004, and I bet professionally full time for about nearly 10 years on that score. And then as professionals experience, it becomes more and more difficult to get a decent bet on, taking a price. All the edges that you have get shut down, particularly. I received letters from bookmakers labeling me as an invaluable client, I was described as. So it's like
Valuable.
Yeah, so that's a nice stigma to be told. It's almost like a badge of honor at first. Then when you get more, it makes betting difficult. So when it became more and more difficult to make it a living full time, I went back to my work job, which is in an entertainment field, and then I work in effect part time now. I still bet, but not as much as I used to on a daily basis.
Okay, so when did your sort of interest in gambling sort of start?
It's I was a weird kid who liked horse racing. Kids supposed to play out in the street. I remember Red Rum winning the Grand National and having 20 pence on to win £1.20 and thinking, that's 5 times my money that I used to have. So that was the interest stemmed as a kid. I started working in the industry in the early 90s. I was working for the Tote. I moved into their trading room in the 90 up to about sort of 92, 93, where I think at the time then betting was real and you did layer price and bookmakers used odds compilers more and you took a view. Whereas nowadays, I think it's more algorithms and just having people bet on smartphones and trying to bring as much volume in rather than taking a stand. I think that's one of the things that the industry's lost.
When you say the Tote, I assume you mean Tote Credit as opposed to the booth on course.
Yeah, Tote Credit had numerous offices around the country, and then it all became centralised in Wigan. So the people who sold the houses in London and moved to Wigan got a right result. But for us, it was probably the first time a huge place was run. It was all computerized. You could see a lot more information. You could see markets live before your eyes. And that probably triggered my interest. I remember working there and seeing this small percentage of people who consistently made it pay. And while I worked in the industry, I was also fascinated by this, I'd say probably 3 or 4% who consistently made profits from it and thought, is that a future way you could make this game pay?
And what was the Tote's attitude to people? That seems like quite a high percentage actually of people that made it pay.
I mean, once it went centralized to the computerized side, the industry became a lot smarter as well. I mean, I think that first year we made some horrible ricks because we were mixing between the old ledger and paper into becoming computerized. I remember we made a huge mistake once with an athlete who she'd got married, her surname had changed. We were laying 14 to 1 for her to win a gold medal, whereas nobody had checked. There was no internet instant feedback. It's like, okay, this girl's actually just got married and name's changed and she's probably the best in the world. So ricks like that were made. I remember Alicia winning an Oaks trial and we didn't adjust. And people upstairs who run the computers just laid her at 25 to 1, even though she'd won the trial and should have been about 3 to 1 at the time. So it was probably that first few years we worked in Wigan was a time for a punter where there was mistakes being made because the two systems were being married together.
And in these days, anyone that took advantage of a rick like that, they'd be gone, wouldn't they? What was the attitude towards them in those days?
You became on a watch list. There was an index card of about 30 to 40 punters who were on the watch list, and if they bet, first of all, it was is there a yard connection, is there a home address connection, and everything became quicker and more efficient. And any mistake became a full report and a full investigation, so you didn't get stung by it again.
So when you started at Wigan, so were all of you like went in there at the same time together?
Yeah, so the office is shut down nationally, and then the head office, I think Wigan gave the Tote, because it's supposed to go to Ireland originally, and then Wigan offered the Tote free rental for the building, which swung the decision. So the office there became a huge building on a Saturday, you had about 300 telephonists, you had 8 in the trading room, and the upstairs was the data and computer side of things. It was just a massive complex.
So you didn't. So there was there was no old sweats there. So you all sort of learned together that some of these people were definitely worth following in.
Yeah, I mean, you got a list almost like a league table, and you knew your premier clients, where every account became instantly accessible by a computer. You could see their bets, you could see their patterns, you could see their yield.
So how many punters were there that when they called and had a bet, all of a sudden everybody had gastroenteritis?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a local shop. It was an independent shop, Webb's, and Webb's got hit by a few of ours some days. Where it was particularly when Martin Pipe was training, and Pipe's owners had big accounts, and they'd have say 4 horses running in the day, and they'd back 3 of them and not back the other one, and we would back the treble down the road. One of us was allowed a trading break, it was called.
So would the firm sort of take it, use that information? Would they push out the one that obviously wasn't being backed? That sort of
Yeah,
thing. Would they?
It became invaluable for a tool like that. There was a well-known owner who, I think the whole hurdle was called Enemy Action, and he owned that one, and he was probably Pipe's top man. And quite often, if he was backing 2 out of the 3 or 3 out of the 4 on the day, then the other horse would fail, and you'd see an explanation on TV that didn't act on the ground, or the course didn't suit him. I'm like, you can say what you like about that.
So obviously you guys are all suddenly making a few quid betting. Did you sort of struggle to get your bets on?
So again, it was a time where I think bookies had a bit more about them, where they would lay a bet. I mean, what would happen normally? I'd say within half an hour, a lot of bookies would catch on to what was happening, and we had screens from other bookies in our office as well of any red flags, any watch your markets. And the horse that we'd marked up, William Hill's, probably within the 10-15 minutes would have it all managed in their shops to watch out for a movement on this kind of horse. So a lot of firms, I'd say you had about a half an hour window for hot information before the red flag and the cashiers and the shops had been informed.
So, at this point, you were winning money betting. Did it ever come to the point where you were just going to work to get the information and the betting was your primary income?
It was a bit of a fusion between the two. I mean, you considered that if you were that inside of the industry, you should make it pay. You had that strong an insight into what was going on. I think a lot of people mistake gambling for the fact that long term you can make it pay if you study it and you've got to commit to it. I mean, we had a benefit there where we got Gallop reports. We had people on the Gallops in the morning who would phone in and say things they've seen. So at that point, I'd say 20-25% of my income was supplemented through my betting.
Okay, so the interesting thing about this, and I was speaking to somebody recently that's talking about inside information. A lot of the professional punters that I've spoken to in the past, they say they absolutely, totally and utterly ignore any inside information if they're purely form students. So, but the one I'm sort of hearing recently is, if you haven't got the inside information, it's going to be a lot more difficult to win, isn't it?
I think on form, I think the higher up the chain it is, the more you can rely on the form. I think when you go into Royal Ascot in a week or so, all the horses are all going for this race. They've all been primed for it. It's a 14-runner race, and all 14 are going for it. I think on a Chelmsford 6:15 race on a Tuesday night, if you can find out that certain horses work well, it's first time out, you can have an edge at the lower end. Obviously, markets are a little bit more sensitive, but I think down the chain, I think definitely information pays. Handicappers that are laid, first time in a handicap type horses who are on a better mark, that's where your edge can be on that side of the racing.
Now, you mentioned that you get Newmarket Gallop reports. We'll talk about Newmarket in a bit. So when did you decide to shed the blanket of having a job and go full-time professional? Because obviously, if you've got a job, you've got all your bills paid and all the stress is taken off. So when did you decide to actually become a professional punter?
So early 2000s, going back to my youth now, I started dating. I was an entertainment manager. I was dating a dancer, and I told her very early on that my ambition was to be off ships and to gamble for a living full time and make it pay. And I had a business plan written. I'm kind of a bit of a geek in numbers and spreadsheets, etc. So I told her up front, because I thought if anybody I'm dating seriously should know my life plan, because it's not recommended for anybody. So when we got engaged and got married, I lived in Manchester originally, and she lived in Cambridge. and 12 miles from Cambridge is Newmarket, which seemed a great base for somebody who was going to be horse based. So I got married, we bought a house in Newmarket, and we live just off Hamilton Road, close to the Gallops, which is very useful.
That's where Barney Curley lived down the bottom of Hamilton Road.
Barney Curley used to shop, and it was very difficult to have a conversation with him in the shop, though.
Yeah, I don't imagine he was going to mark your car. No. So, but I mean, you said that a lot of your profit was coming from, knowing what clever people were backing. So, did that information dry up when you left? So did you have to live off your wits and pick your own winners?
So
did
a little bit more of that, and having connections in Newmarket helped. You get a bit of an insight. At the time, one of the biggest angles for profit was Bet365's big marketing campaign was they were first up with their odds, and they were always sometimes and this is all pre-Betfair days, where Betfair didn't shape the market as much as it does now. But Bet365 would be very early up with their 2-year-olds and the unraced horses. And there was a lot of profit could be made there, just knowing how horses worked on the gallops. You get to know in Newmarket how they're shaping. Bet365 was the first account that I got closed when it was they didn't like my morning methodology.
Right. So, okay. So what was your angle? Yeah, but was it still? So it's still inside information. Was the angle? Or were you a good judge of the form?
I think first of all, if the handicapping and the unraced 2-year-olds, definitely inside information based for being here helped. I think good judge on value and numbers. I mean, horses, a lot of my betting on principle is I don't like backing a horse if it hasn't done it previously. If it's run a distance 4 times and it's been placed twice and lost the other 2, I don't see that as a viable betting opportunity. I'd sooner find a horse in the race that's won over that trip. So a lot of my betting angle and my approach to a race is finding a horse that's done something against a horse that hasn't. And I think that's where my numerical advantage comes in and my percentages.
Okay, now how long? Just going back to the tote. How long did it take to sort the wheat from the chaff from the the punters that were winning? Because people have purple patches but they're still useless. So how long did it take to sort of filter that what was good and what was bad?
I think for myself working there, I'd say within 6 months, you could learn whose accounts were hot. We had one of the traders, William Hill, was much respected, and he would quite often go for a big each way double, always around sort of 9:45 in the morning, where obviously the calls would come in and the message was there. His each way doubles were always worth marking, and you got a mention of if Mr. So and so had come in and the bet had come in, was worth a check yourself at that point. And then one of the traders amongst our room was allowed a trading break for 15 minutes, which was the unofficial working term.
Did you have? I mean, would you allow accounts to remain open purely to get the information, even probably against the firms of wishes?
Sometimes yes, and it made sense. So Lord Wyatt was our chairman, and
Lord Wyatt, Weeford, yeah.
That's some fantastic conversations of why people won and why it made sense to keep them open. You had somebody who was like a head lad at a yard. If he used to bet 25s or 30 pounds, and he was coming on for £100 one day, you knew you had a live one there. So those yard connections and the people who were close to stable bases, sometimes if you're losing on their account, you can make a hell of a lot more by then shortening or lengthening others in the race that you've got that info from.
Okay, right. We're going to talk about Newmarket and the perils of the whisperers from there in the next part.
Okay.